Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining the Southwest Center for Human Relations Studies at the University of Oklahoma for our monthly webinar series. I'm Asia Mukes, Communications and Project Manager, and we are one month away from concluding the first year of the expansion of NCORE to this monthly webinar series. Our hope is that we continue the conference's tradition of working to improve racial and ethnic relations on college campuses by providing virtual learning opportunities on effective strategies to enhance access, social development, education, communication, and cross-cultural understanding for traditionally underrepresented populations. Registration is open for our April webinar, the second of 2 free special NCORE preview sessions to support your participation in the conference in Portland. That session is titled NCORE 101, What to Expect and How to Show Up. The session will offer reflections from individuals at different stages of their NCORE participation, from first-timers to seasoned participants, and provide resources, tips, and inspiration to NCORE 2019 participants. I will moderate a Q&A discussion with Sedelta Usawi from the National Education Association, Michael Riley from DePaul University, Emma Coddington from Willamette University, and Nathan Nguyen from West Michigan State. We still want you to have those webinar lunch and learns, so feel free to invite coworkers, students, and other colleagues around your desk to the conference room or auditorium. Both webinars are free. All of our previous webinars are available online for on-demand viewing. Please visit our website and register to watch. Make sure you're live posting. We want to know where you're watching. So tweet, Instagram, and Facebook pictures from your office with the hashtag NCORE and start the conversation online. Today we have Iris Outlaw, Director of Multicultural Student Programs and Services at the University of Notre Dame, Vernon Wall, Director of Business Development for LeaderShape, Inc., and Quantá Taylor, Assistant Director of Student Involvement for the Department of Student Activities within the Office of Student Life at The Ohio State University. Together, they will be discussing strategies for capitalizing and maximizing on the experience had by students while attending NCORE. The center is grateful for their expertise. So you all, if you don't mind unmuting yourself or whoever will start, and take it away.
Good afternoon. As Ajay said, thank you so much for introducing us. I am Iris Outlaw. I'm the Director of Multicultural Programs and Services at the University of Notre Dame, and I've been with the university for 27 years and have attended NCORE for well over 26 years. This is our agenda that we're going to cover over our next 90 minutes. We're going to introduce ourselves. We want to get an assessment of who you are, and then we're going to talk about what to do before NCORE, what to do while you're at NCORE, and how to educate your students in being prepared to navigate it, and then what you can do in your campuses. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about iScore, who had Iowa State has been bringing over 30 students each year to NCORE for at least 2 decades. And we'll take some Q&A after that. I don't know if my cohorts have anything they would like to say. Okay. If not, then we will move on to talk about what to do before NCORE. And it's a key in selecting your delegation to prepare your students for coming to NCORE. At Notre Dame, we have been taking students ever since the mid-90s. And one of the things that we look at with our student delegation is making sure that they have been involved in our campus community, that they have been involved in, committed to diversity and inclusion. We also look at the interaction the students have had with our office and how they have used us as a resource. The important pieces that we have in Notre Dame is our Diversity Council of Notre Dame, which serves as an advisory capacity for our office, as well as they have representatives from the 35 underrepresented student organizations on campus, and we do have representatives from student government who sit at that table. And they also been very involved in creating the diversity initiatives for the Division of Student Affairs. So we think it's very important to have representatives from that group attend NCORE right along with their leadership development skills. We also look at students who are formal and informal leaders. So you don't have to be the president of a group, but of an organization, but if you have been very involved, even behind the scenes, we think it's important for you to actually attend NCORE and to get that networking, not only with students, but with other faculty and administrators who are there. So this is, we found, has been very beneficial for those students. And even at times we've taken graduate students. So majority of the time we're taking undergrad. We have taken graduate students, and they have found it very beneficial when they return to campus and working with their peers. And hopefully then they begin to network, not only if they're in the graduate school, but they'll work with students in the law school. They'll also work with students who are in our Mendoza College of Business. And for the past 4 years or 5 years now, we've been actually taking one of our student interns who work in our office. And because they are very aware of what our office mission is and our vision, and they also serve as a representative of who we are and as advisors to us at various times of the year, we think it's important for them to get that experience as well. And it's been really beneficial for them in helping them with their own identity development in a variety of efforts, be it from race and ethnicity to gender. And interacting and talking to professionals who are in those arenas has helped to bolster what they're even looking at and aspiring to do after graduation. We also then coordinate a pre-trip meeting with the students. So we bring them in, we talk to them about our expectations, what they hope to get out of it, to make sure that this is a good fit. We don't want them going thinking this is a party, because it definitely is a week on and a very intense week, but we try to do some debriefing. But I let them know, I don't want to see you following behind me while I'm at NCORE. They have their own business cards. They are to be networking. And if we give them 50 business cards, I don't want to see 50 when they come back to campus. And we at times have established learning agreements with them. So in knowing what they want to get out of NCORE, then we also say, how can we help you develop it? We don't tell them what sessions they need to attend, but we do make them attend at least one pre-conference, which they have found very beneficial. And at times, students have been selected to serve as liaison for some of the affinity groups at NCORE.
Iris, if I could add just a couple of things. Well, one thing, actually. One is, I really think it's important for there to be conversations with students about their identities and who they are before they come to NCORE. Because I think what typically happens is, for students of color, many of them feel that they already got this race thing, and so they're just going to come and, it's going to be sort of a cute little experience. But the reality is that they may know their own race experience from being specifically African American, or being Latino, or being Latinx, or being Indigenous or Native American, Asian American. But that's their experience. But what about other racial identities? So a lot of the growth and development that happens for students of color is around them realizing that they have a lot to learn around other identities, other racial identities. And so I don't think that a lot of students know that coming in. The second thing is, for white students, it can be a jolt, because if they've not started to really engage in conversations around privilege, they're going to be, that's what's going to happen, because it's going to be a lot of those conversations. So it's really important for you to have some really good conversations with students around getting them centered into who they are and the questions they have and the struggles they've had, and also to the successes they've had, but knowing that each person will have a different experience based on who they are racially.
And I think what's key, what you brought up, Vernon, too, is even in regard to their specific ethnicity, understanding that their experience for someone who's African American or Latinx is not monolithic. That there are some people who are very embracing of their identities, and they understand that if I'm Latino and I am Mexican, my experience could be very different than a second generation, someone from El Salvador or someone from Guatemala. And so being open to is key and paramount. I know in our campus at times we have issues with students who are Puerto Rican, and they didn't want to affiliate with the Mexican students. So we had to work on that very, very hard and intentional to get students to understand that, hey, they are from the Latinx diaspora. And yes, because they may become because of privilege, because of the economic base, but you have to understand that when people look at them, they're gonna assume Puerto Rican, but they're gonna look at you and say, hey, you're Mexican. And so there's a whole nother education piece that needs to happen within that. So you are so true.
Well, and as you're talking, Iris, I think about the fact that so many students on their campuses, specifically if you're at a predominantly white institution, you come in because many of those students of color are experts on their campus because they're sort of the onlys and they're always looked to. And so they have this sort of royalty around them as, you know, I'm the all-knowing when it comes to student of color issues. They come to NCORE and realize, no, you're not as woke as you think you are. So you may need to take some seats because there's many things we all need to learn. And so that's the power, I think, of NCORE. It allows folks to come in. Yes, we can celebrate your gifts and the wonderful things that you do on your campus, but you also need to realize that you've got a lot to learn. And you can do that by talking to other students who are from other campuses. So I think it's just a powerful experience for folks. So I think we mentioned too, if folks have specific questions as we're going through, put them in the chat box so we can respond. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add about before.
So let's transition to doing what we talk about doing while at NCORE. So the last point that Ms. Iris makes is talking about institutional responsibilities and understanding expectations. Many of our institutions have allocated a numerous of dollars for this event. So we want to make sure that we're able to have ways of talking about what is that return on investment and how are students able to take what they're learning at NCORE and get that back to their communities. So the first thing we want to talk about identifying student spaces. There are many different ways to have this happen. One thing that is very much the student-centered experience at NCORE is the student welcome reception that happens on the first night. That is an opportunity in which we recognize our 20 student scholars, but an opportunity for students to begin developing that network and have those conversations. We've been very fortunate over the last couple of years to develop 2 PreCons that are very much student-centered. So I enjoy coming to the reception at the end of that first night of PreCons and being like, oh, you all have been there for the last 8 hours having conversations. You've begun this. There's already a group me or a text message conversation happening in that. So I think those are very much informal opportunities to do this. There's always been a student debriefing room. This is normally a lounge or something that will have students, either graduate or undergraduate, who have been to the conference before, who is there to help students process and understand, like, hey, this is what I need, or this is what's going on, or can you help me do this? So I think being able to connect both while the conference, but also online. The hashtag NCORE student is what we use during the convention to be able to connect students, or, hey, we have charged members of the Student Participation and Leadership Committee of the National Advisory Council to buy coffee for students. So for me, my institution provides me an allotment of money to buy random coffees to have students have conversations so we can see what our peers are doing or what other institutions are suffering on their campus to be able to have those conversations. The next one we'll talk about is identifying sessions and being aware of presenters. NCORE over the last couple of years has been very great about making sure we are labeling and identifying sessions that are equal and adequate to the knowledge base of students happening in there. In that process, it is, what is my knowledge base? So as Vernon mentioned earlier, I come in and I am the student expert on my campus. How am I able to go in and find sessions that allow me to share my student experience in that? But on that, we also say beware of presenters. NCORE started as a space for professionals and faculty and staff members to come together. But over the last couple of years, we've continued to see an increase in the number of students. And as we have added language into presenter agreements about being mindful of who is in what space and that you may have students attending your sessions, there are some sessions that are like, hey, I may think that I'm there, but I'm not quite there yet. So understanding how to show up, not how to be dismissive, but also owning and showing up in that space. One of my favorite sessions last year is when we had a student who was in a Black Identity Development, and she was a sophomore student, but came in and commanded the room in her knowledge base of who she was and what she was doing on that campus. And by far was the most junior member in the room, but she had an expertise and a way to command that. So I appreciate when students are able to walk in that and be able to share those. I've tapped her to present with me this year about, hey, how are you doing this and how are we having those conversations about student leaders and what that means for them on the campus? In setting expectations, NCORE is a lot. There are times that you can go and talk about white privilege and students of color issues and activism and triggers and microaggressions, and you need time to be able to depress and be like, I can't do another session right now, and acknowledge that that is okay. Our students have a minimum of attending 2 sessions throughout the day and an all-day pre-con. And that is something we go like, I need you to take a breath. I need you to be able to go and meet with a student or someone else that you connected with in this. Being able to talk about when do I need to see you, what is our meetup location, what are those opportunities is really important. Like Ms. Iris said, there is no need for us to have you follow us through the conference. I see you on campus all the time. You don't need to see me while I'm here. But we do have check-ins just to be like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? So I want to be very mindful of, I will see you in the morning to do a debrief, or I'll see you all at dinner, but throughout the rest of the day, that's what's going on. But making sure that you remind your students that it's okay to take some me time, because you can go to a session and be really charged up or be really triggered, either prepared or not prepared for that moment to happen, but be able to just sit back and breathe in it is really important. They can find those spaces and knowing what's going on. Divide and conquer. So we have been fortunate enough at OSU to bring as many as 15 students to NCORE. And in that, there's no more than 2 of them allowed in the same session. I need for a part of our return to investment is that we are getting the knowledge basis of those students in there. So there are 5 of y'all sitting in the same session. We are not getting our bang for our buck on this. So sometimes it's like, hey, we all want to sit in the same session. I need you all to step up and step outside of your comfort zone and be like, yes, it's what you want to go to, but what is that thing that you don't know about that in your role you should be able to support? The president joined us last year, and in that it was a, hey, I know these 3 things, but I do not know about gender non-binary folk. So let's go to some of those sessions so you can learn. So as you're advocating for those students on your campus, be mindful of what that looks like and how you can develop a knowledge base and the understanding to be able to best support those students. Encouraging networking. We also give our students business cards in this, but it's always for my undergraduate students, it's an opportunity for them to network up. So many times we're having the conversation about, hey, I'm considering graduate school, or hey, I'm considered for working for this nonprofit or things like that. So going back to identifying those sessions, it's extremely important to be like, hey, this person from UPenn or UCLA or this school is presenting. That may be the session that you need to attend to go through and be like, hey, I'm interested in this program. How are you making that connection? I also tell it to my graduate students. I've taken master's and doctoral level students to the conference. I'm like, hey, you enjoy this research or you're researching the same thing. Have those conversations. I know people get excited to see a Susan Jones or Vernon Wall walking down the hall. I'm like, they're a human. Go up and say hello and introduce yourself, and they'll have that conversation with you. Be willing to go to coffee and those things like that. So I think that it's not just, I'm here to attend, but how are you developing your network and other things? And that network is not only just professional staff, but also your other student leaders. We try to do a District of Ohio roundup at NCORE when we're there when we have our students. So being able to connect with students, and I think the NCORE staff has been great to be like, OSU or the state of Ohio are there so that we can have them connect and contact. They can have a proximity viewpoint of this is what we're experiencing, this is what's going on. For me, I like to see my students at dinner for that debriefing and checking in. So, because normally the evenings are fun activities, things like that. So you've gone to sessions, you set in, you've networked, you've had lunch with someone else. Let's come together and share that. So we go around and there's a 2-minute popcorn of, hey, this is what I've learned. These are the questions I have, and this is my application to what I see at OSU. And in that, I start journaling down those points, because me as a practitioner, as an advocate, as a scholar, and as a staff member, my job is to be able to make those connections and answer those questions as they come up on our campus. So being mindful of being able to, hey, what did you experience? What's going on? What haven't you all seen yet? And being okay, like, okay, I need you to be able to go here. I need you to see this person. I think one of the biggest things that we can do is for our students is learn how to be that mentor that can connect and then get out of the way. So in that, hey, I have not been able to find this person, or I have not been able to find a chance to talk about this. Okay, there may not be a session, but I know someone that can have a conversation with you about that. So let me shoot this text message off, get you 2 to meet, and then get out of the way. But also I've had some students, my white students, who go to NCORE and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person. No, you're not a horrible person. You're just learning things and having conversations that you haven't gone on, or, oh, I'm not as woke as I thought I was, or, oh, this is not, or why are we not doing this, how to make this happen? Before you come back to my administration wanting to take over the university, let's have some conversations about what that revolution needs to look like and having to navigate those spaces. And then again, creating distance is really important. So it's easy to be a safety net. It's easy to want to follow along. I make sure that students don't even know where my room is if they need anything. I need you all to be like, you're going to experience this conference and understand that. So how do you depend on each other and understand that growing at NCORE is a physical experience, it's an emotional experience, it's a cognitive experience, and understanding that the dissonance they achieve is also very important for them. I'm sure my panelists have other comments of things that I missed out, so I will yield my time to you all.
So what I want to add is that my students have made me up my game, and so we establish group meets. And that's another way that we check in on each other. And in fact, we all come in on the first, they have to do the pre-con, we come in on Memorial Day, and we have dinner together, once again, to strategize our plan. And then I touch base with them that Wednesday. After they've done their pre-con, we touch base during the lunch at that point in time. And then we do other touch points just to see how they are coming along and if you want to process. But we normally do one group dinner together prior to. We may touch base at another luncheon, but I really try to encourage them to network and encourage them to get in the things that are already set in place that Quantá addressed in regard to student debriefing, because I think that's very important. Because a lot of times students feel that their institution is horrendous, and once they are at NCORE and they're talking to their peers, they find out, you know what, I may not have it as bad as I think. You know, and reminding them that they're gathering information to bring back to actually modify and implement on our respective campuses, which is key. Because we tell them they also serve as an advisory board for us. We're investing a lot of time in them. And as you talked about journaling, our students have to give us a report as we talk about what to do afterwards. But that's where they start gathering that information. So if they want to make
Well, hopefully Iris will come back. As she's coming back, I can give you 3 things. One is definitely consider, so if you decide you have a delegation coming and there are faculty and staff coming along with students, please make sure that those faculty and staff know also to the learning agreements and also to the fact that you'll be debriefing and gathering together. Because I really think it's important for it to be a collective group conversation, because it will be a great learning experience for those faculty and staff who are joining you to hear from those students, and also for students to join. Because I think sometimes when faculty and staff go from campuses, they don't feel that they're a part of the delegation, and then as a result, they don't go to the debriefings, and the students are questioning, well, what's going on here? So at least have a conversation. If you decide that that's not something you want your faculty and staff to do in the delegation, that's fine. But talk about it before you go, so when you get there, people have those expectations. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is just, there are opportunities for there to be caucuses around different identity groups, racial groups. And so for many students, they've not really been involved in caucuses. So if you are a person who's not been involved and you're taking students, you may want to kind of read up on the caucusing experience, because it's pretty intense when you get all white students together, or all Black students together, or all people of color. I mean, and they're not just students, anyone can be in the caucus based on their identity groups. But that's something that's a surprise to a lot of students, because they've not been involved in that. And along with that too is, please remember that this is the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, which means that if you are someone who identifies as LGBT or any other historically marginalized identity, and you're a student, you're going to come to the event, you're going to come to NCORE thinking that there's going to be some conversation around your identity. There could be, if it's connected to race and ethnicity. So in other words, we can talk about LGBT people of color, but we won't necessarily have conversations with just LGBT folks. Now, the reason I say that is because if you see the world through your marginalized lens and it's not race, you're going to come to NCORE and be a little frustrated as a student. Because think of those activists that are on your campus around ability, around class, around LGBT, keep going down the list, around nationality, etc. They may be coming in with a lens that is not specific. Well, let me be specific. If you're a white person and you have a marginalized lens that is, of course, not race, then it's going to bring up some stuff for you. So folks need to realize that when you're in an NCORE space, you're going to have to be in race. Even though you could be so many other identities, and many of them are intersecting, it's really important to know that you may, as an LGBT person, get a little triggered because things aren't happening in a way that connects with your marginalized lens. So white LGBT folks need to realize that you're coming in privilege. So you're coming into a race conference in privilege. So really important for those conversations to happen. So I know Iris, you're back. So we want to make sure you finish your comment. Did you, if you have.
I'm back. I didn't realize I had disappeared and all kinds of other things popped up on my screen. So it took me a minute, but I'm back. Thank you.
So I think we're good to talk about what we're doing at NCORE. I'm going to transition to Vernon now to talk about some beginning things after NCORE.
Cool, thanks. So, I mean, the number one thing after NCORE is just for students to help them make meaning of the experience, whatever that may be. It could be smaller groups, it could be a meeting afterwards, it could be a dinner or something, so that folks can start to make meaning of the experience. I know Iris mentioned it earlier, which is so important. It is about them thinking a little about, so what did I learn at NCORE that can help make my campus better? I'm sort of you know, you're sort of an envoy. You're coming back now, basically saying, okay, so what have I learned? What did I learn? Not only for myself as an individual, but for our campus and our community. What's that? Another thing that I really love is when campuses develop on-campus mentors. I know some campuses that before they even go to NCORE, they have to select a person that's sort of their coach. And it doesn't have to be someone who's going with them. And this is actually better, actually. Someone who's on campus, who's someone that they can process with when they come back. And it's great if it's someone who's not from the delegation. It's someone who's a faculty or staff member on campus who they can go back and sort of process and have conversations with when they get back. I know that many campuses do reflection papers so that students can, in a blog or in some sort of written form, just sort of reflect on, so what was my learning? It can be as structured as giving some prompts that you want them to all respond to, or it can be just free flowing and have them do some narratives around, based on NCORE, here are some of the things that I learned. I think it's really important to prepare students for the new lenses that they will have when they come back. I think it's really interesting that, you know, for some folks, you know, they will go to NCORE and come back and, you know, they will learn some things, but, you know, it will be a good experience. For other students, it will be mind-blowing to them, and they will just notice everything. And be pretty critical sometimes, and not in a negative way. I'm just saying they'll be critical. And so just helping them manage the new lenses that they will have as they come back, especially if they do some of the caucus work, and then they'll start to notice things in their friends and their classmates that they've never noticed before. So it's really important to kind of keep that in mind. We want them to kind of also to help them to not be so overwhelmed. I think there's a lot happening at NCORE, and so people will really come back and feel that, wow, there's so much to do. And always remember, it's a process and a goal. It's a process, and we're all a part of this process to make our world and our campuses better. And a lot of times, though, we focus on the goal. It's like, oh my God, we got to get there. But the reality is, you know, we're in this process. So how can I not be overwhelmed by the fact that I'm doing great work on my campus and I want to continue to do great work? I think it's important to provide opportunities for people to share the things that they've learned. I know that some campuses host program sessions where they host opportunities for students to go around to different student organizations and share their NCORE experience, whatever it may be, writing articles for the student newspaper. And we're going to talk later about what Iowa State has done, but it's really important to think about, so what are ways in which the information can get out to folks? Also to in-class presentations. I always tell students that if there's an opportunity in a class that you're in to get extra credit, or in some sort of way credit for being involved in NCORE and doing some things in your classes, that would be great. I think that most of us know that students who attend NCORE are excellent in terms of recruiting the next class of students that would attend the next year. And so make sure you utilize them as you talk about future delegations for going to NCORE. I think that there's an opportunity to develop sort of a clearinghouse, a Google Doc of things and resources that students can use and share. It's an opportunity. That's one thing that I think that students really resonate to at NCORE, is that there's just a wealth of just resources that are out there on race and ethnicity on college and university campuses that we continue to add to. And I even have, just in my inbox in general, I have an NCORE resources inbox that anytime something comes along, I just kind of slip it in there so I can use it later. And I think students will really resonate to that. If there are advisory boards or search committees or anything that happens after NCORE, you may want to consider using these students in those leadership roles on campus. What I've found is developing delegations like this for NCORE allows you to broaden the number of students that can be involved in decision-making processes on campus, whether it be search committees or ad hoc committees for student affairs or academic affairs. Because typically what I've found is that we have about 5 students that we ask to be on every search committee, because they're students of color that we love, and we keep using them over and over and over again. And that makes no sense at all, because there are so many other students that are involved. And so, to be honest, NCORE allows you to increase your base of students who you can then tap into to use for, and to not necessarily use, but to ask them to be involved in a variety of different ways. That's probably all I have. I don't know if Iris, if you and Quantá have anything you want to add.
I think also what has happened after NCORE for some of our students, as I had alluded to earlier, is that they have been so impressed, made such impressions on faculty and administrators, that they had them serve as liaisons for the affinity groups that are part of NCORE. And then, as well as, because of the way that they have been able to articulate their passion for whatever issue in a session that they may be, they have been invited back to co-presenter with that faculty member the following year, which I found was the first that ever happened to one of our students. And so she was kind of like, how am I going to get there? And I said, well, we'll give you lodging because we're taking students already. And then in sharing this information with my associate vice president, he's like, Iris, just go ahead and take care of it out of your budget, because this is also recognition for the institution and that commitment. And then when she came back, to talk to other students about getting them interested in saying, hey, can we be considered to go to NCORE and serve as a representative? Like I stated before, the students really understand that this is not a vacation. It's not a trip to some place that they've never been, but it's actually information gathering that occurs there, and another way of student development theory being put to practice, turning them into actual practitioners. And they have come back and challenged administration, at times even me, but that's a good thing. Because I can't be in all the sessions, my staff can't be in all the sessions, so they bring that additional knowledge back and have about some issues in a different way. So it's been key and very important in helping us with our even professional development, as well as helping them.
I think the last thing that I would want to add in is a couple of pieces. So I think that something that Vernon mentioned is about processing with your students, but we have to learn how to process at different times. So we do that immediately, we do it after the day, but then that first week back when we do our welcome week and hey, we're coming together for the year, for those student leaders who have come, who have maintained those connections with the students and people that they've made connected to NCORE, they're still having those conversations. So for me, it's like, how are we thinking about things differently? I've had this experience, I processed this, I learned this challenged me this way. Coming back to that, I think it's one of those things that you can't see NCORE as a one-time experience. I've always seen NCORE for our students as a catalyst. So for me, it's going back and learning how to go back and check in on those moments of, hey, this keynote speaker said this, or I know you attended the session and you said you were really bothered, or it made you think about things differently. So being able to come back in and check in with those students and see how they're continually processing this. Something else that we do after NCORE is talk about programming implications, whether it's joint retreats, whether it's cultural awareness months, whether it's workshops or finishing dissertation boot camps. We have like, hey, who are those energetic people that we run into that we think could be an outside perspective that our students could connect with? Whether that's going through the vendor mart, whether that's going and being like, hey, this keynote speaker was great, we should book them for this, but be able to have those conversations about what does this mean for our programming? So what is that now and so what? I've given you this information, you've seen this, now what does it look like on our campus? We've been fortunate enough to be able to go through and be like, hey, I want to bring you in to talk about this, or hey, I want to have a workshop, or I sat in a session which this was a part of their orientation. How do we make that as a part of our orientation programs? Yes, great things for us to consider and for us to be able to navigate through is just really important in that piece. As professional staff, after a conference, what we do is called NCORE, which is an opportunity for us to go back and do a 5-minute presentation on what we learned. And we have incorporated our students into that piece as well. So just as our professional staff will go before our board and our student governments and our directors, we have our students do that as well to go, hey, this is what we took away from this, as a way to show them what they've got out of this. Because yes, we can read a report, but I think one of my things I've learned with my administration is to get them to hear the students' passion and connection and to see that student in front of them and how they're able to talk about that has always been a better implication for the work that we're doing on campus.
Our students have also come back and recommended speakers that they were very impressed with to bring to campus so that they can get a broader, our campus can really benefit from their experience. So the first time that we brought Opal Tomete and Patrice Collier, they were seen at NCORE by one of my ADs, and we brought them, and the students who were in the room said, oh, we've got to have these people at our campus. And it was standing room, in fact, standing room only in 2 rooms, the spillover room as well as the main room. And we just brought Opal back again because she was there before. They're like, well, we've got to bring her back again. And I didn't realize their first year at Notre Dame was also, and it's their senior year now, so they have got a chance to see Opal twice. But we're very impressed with it. So, so that's another thing that we use them as an advisory board to say, I benefited from being in this 90-minute session, but I would like for our campus to actually have an experience. So when they come to campus, we bring these speakers, we do workshops with faculty and staff, and we've been partnering with HR to implement some of those workshops, do a lecture that evening. And so with Q&A and making sure that there's always some interaction with more people in the campus community to benefit from their knowledge. So that has been quite beneficial.
So I know that we're gonna, Vernon, you're making faces, so I'm gonna yield.
Well, I know I had one other thought as Iris was talking, and that is that I know that for some campuses, there's been a sort of a legacy of students going to NCORE for year to year. And I know on some campuses, you can't go 2 years in a row. It's always new delegations, but I would just encourage folks that if you do have sort of a legacy of students going, consider having students going a second year if they would present. Because I think having them co-present with a faculty or staff member from your delegation is just a great experience for them. Especially that can sort of be a reward. It's like the only way that we will allow you to go for a second year is if you agree to present a topic with someone else, or at least submit a program. Doesn't mean it may not be accepted, but submit it, because I think it's a great opportunity, because there's so many institutions that have been doing this for many, many years. And I think it's important for us to continue to have that legacy and that connection. So that was it.
And I'm gonna challenge Vernon, and it's something I very rarely do. Like, I don't think our students necessarily need our faculty and staff members on that.
That's good. Good point.
Like, we had students who came in and was like, we want to do a presentation on utilizing the student voice. So there were none of us on it, but it was 4 of our seniors who had been before wanting to go again. And that was the deal that we made was, if y'all gonna do this, you're gonna be presenting and doing X, Y, and Z. And they're like, hey, can we serve as trip leaders? So they wanted more work. So they know I don't want to do things. So like, let me butter you up and make it happen. But knowing that our students have expertise and a lived voice, lived experiences that allow them to be able to connect. I know that for years we receive feedback there aren't student presenters. So I think as much as we can encourage our student leaders, our returners to come up and be like, hey, let's own your experience. And that's our job as professionals, is to be like, hey, I can talk about what I'm doing with my students, but how do we have students talk about what they're doing with students? I think one of the issues in higher education is we talk about students and not with students. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think being able to incorporate that to be a with conversation is something that we have to be able to do.
Totally.
And I also encourage our students to, I said, if you want to go a second time, I'll help you with your lodging, with your travel, but I encourage them also to apply for the NCORE Scholars piece too, because they're mandated to have, what is it, about 20 hours or something like that. And that's just, the 20 hours are just going to workshops and then do a presentation at the end of the conference. And that's additional good experience. And they just do, it's like a poster session that they do at the end of the conference for the staff and normally their faculty and administrators who come with them. But that's another good opportunity for them to feel comfortable in sharing that information.
All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Vernon to talk about what iScore does.
Cool. So first of all, just want to remind folks that we've got the chat box. So if you have any questions that you want to ask us, anything that's come up thus far, put it in there so we can respond, because this is sort of our last little section, and then we'll see if there's anything that we can assist people with on your campuses. So some of you may have heard of Iowa State University's Conference on Race and Ethnicity. They have, I happen to have been blessed to have worked at Iowa State University for 7 years as Assistant Dean of Students. And my first year there, Dr. Tom Hill, who was Vice President for Student Affairs at the time, called me into his office and said, Vernon, I know that you've been to NCORE before. Welcome to our campus. And we're going to take our first delegation to NCORE. And so I was so excited to be a part of something that is now celebrating their 20th year of taking students to NCORE, probably longer than that. I know the one day well, let's start off with the delegation. You can definitely Google, Iowa State University, Iowa State ISCORE or iScore, and there's a website, there's a lot of resources there. Japana Kellogg is the director of the program, or the director of the office. Definitely a resource. He couldn't be with us, and he would actually be here on the webinar with us, but he's not able to join us. But just want to let you know there's a huge resource that's there. What they typically do is they have a course that students take that's connected with going to NCORE. There's very structured sort of experiences for students to have before, during, and after. And it's a group of faculty and staff and students that go. And then it culminates in the spring of each year with a one-day conference, which is now actually a two-day conference. There's a PreCon that happens, a pre-convention day that happens for faculty and staff. And then there is a day of workshops and keynotes on a Friday that really, it's some of the students who attended NCORE will do programs about what they learned, but anybody can present. And so it's been 20 years. They celebrated their 20th year next year. And so you can definitely look on their website. They just finished up their last conference, which I actually had the keynote, which I was very excited to do. So we had a great dialogue and conversation. And at Iowa State University, they had 1,000 people registered to be a part of the experience on that day. Now, keep in mind, it's students, faculty, and staff. So a lot of them were in and out based on, what their timing was in terms of their classes and that sort of thing. But it's a great opportunity. And what we've done, we pledged to do after the webinar is we're going to pull together sort of a little packet for you that we're going to send. I've asked the folks at Iowa State to send me some things, and we've got a couple of other things. So we're going to send you some resources. There are a couple of videos that we'll send after the webinar, so you can kind of connect with us and continue to ask us questions if you need. So just want to make sure I mention that. But that's pretty much it for the Iowa State Conference on Race and Ethnicity and Iowa State's commitment. Japana Kellogg, I know that people are putting in the chat box that Japana's a perfect person to connect with. And he's definitely open to having conversations with you about student delegations and what they've done over the years. So, and I don't know if Iris, if you want to add to that too, or Quantá.
Well, I realized that one of the things that we hadn't talked about was the funding. I know when we were doing this presentation quite often, people have asked, how do you get funding to take the students? For some of us, we've gotten money various ways. I have money set up in my budget for for student programming. And so I use that also for conferences, conference attendance for students specifically. I know other institutions have to appeal or request funding. So I would say look at other departments where NCORE and the mission and goal of it aligns with those departments, and ask them for additional fundings. And also it's good for the students to have skin in the game. So if they're involved in organizations and they're coming back and going to be leaders, possibly those organizations can also provide some funding. Then, this can be NCORE, depending on where it is, can be full package, approximately $1,500. That includes meals, etc. What with our office, we give students $200 for meals for that week, and they do quite well. In fact, a lot of them turn money back into us. But we also pick up their airfare, we pick up their lodging. So we have one room for the ladies, another room for the guys. We take 4 students each, and we try to do it of each ethnicity. We're trying to get people to come from student government and have them help fund. But we have gotten a lot of support from our student affairs as well. So we even try to send or have other attends from, and we've had those from HR to our hall directors, which are called rectors, who have attended. And this year, I think right now we have 8 people attending outside of the students that we're bringing. And depending on the close proximity to the university, we normally have more. When it was in Indianapolis, we had 15 people. But I know funding can become a big issue. So I would say even if students have an opportunity for professional development where they can write certain departments, we have a grant process through Arts and Letters that's learning beyond the classroom. Students can request from that department funding for those events. So possibly it's too late for this year for students to apply for something like that. But if you start looking and earmarking students in the fall, that gives them time to start requesting assistance to attend NCORE at the end of the year. And we look at students who are not seniors, but normally juniors or sophomores, someone who's going to be there for a while so that we can kind of get our money's worth. There is no free. We want to see how the student also develops as a leader on our campus.
Yeah, what I would add around money is, and I'm so glad that Iris, you brought this up because it's really important for us to talk about just the funding piece. And what I would share too is I think it's really important for you to look at the mission of your institution and just kind of read through it and read what your president has said over the last year around issues of inclusion and connect it to his language, his or her, their language. Connect it, whatever that is, because I'm guaranteeing you, they're talking about it. And so you need to, in some sort of way, make it a part of the fabric of the institution. I mean, I will tell you, that's why Iowa State University does such a great job, is because they, from the very beginning, they followed the narrative that the president was using at the time, and they continue to adapt it based on that. And most presidents, I mean, there's no way they can say, well, I didn't say that. You did say that. And as a result, this is something that will meet your goal. So definitely look at that, look at your mission statements, look at what's going on in your communities. And really frame some things in that way. I think that's very helpful. The other thing is I noticed, I think Quantá already responded to the person that asked around the student scholar information. So second week in April, information will be coming out about that. And so if you have additional questions about it, I know Quantá can maybe answer those, but yeah.
I think one more piece related to the funding, I think that something that Vernon mentioned was about intersecting and multiple identities. And I think that is where that coalition building can happen. Something that we had to learn to do at Ohio State was caucus who all was going, because we would get to NCORE and I'll be like, oh, you're here as well. And I admit that as a burden of an institution this size is that we have a women's center and we have women's gender and sexuality studies faculty member going, the Department of Sociology going. So I think with that, we had never registered for a group rate before, but we had 28 attendees there. So I think there are funding pieces that knowing as a collective who may have interest in that allows you to have cost saving effects on the other end. Ms. Iris did mention the Student Scholars Program. I think that is a wonderful opportunity. We select 20 per year. It covers the cost of for those students. So in that part, you are just going to be able to cover their housing as well as their transportation for them to get there. But in that, they're required to do sessions. They have exclusive meet and greet things with a couple of presenters and things of that nature as well. So it's a great way for your students to get a deeper connection to what is going on. I don't know if I shared this. I also serve as the chair of the Student Participation Leadership Committee. And in that, our job is to create opportunities for students while at NCORE to have opportunities with each other. So we coordinate a number of different parts, and Student Scholars is one of those.
So I think, did we ever cover our, what we want to instruct first attendees to help their students to navigate?
Go ahead, Ms. Iris, it's on your heart.
It's on
your heart, go.
So the NCORE does have a first timer session that I would encourage people encourage their students to go to. And if it's the first time for you, definitely to attend that. It can be overwhelming. If you go to NASPA, it's not that overwhelming as NASPA, but it can be. I am a papers person, so even though apps are wonderful, I have to sit down with my booklet, go through it, earmark what I want to see. And that's one of the things that I talk to my students about is, like Quantá had mentioned earlier, we don't want to see everybody in the same session. Pick out what your interest is. If you see somebody else is covering, try to pick something else. This is about gathering information. You can't be gathering information if you're all sitting in the same room. So that's key. And be able to tell the students it's okay to, if you're in a session and you don't like it, don't feel bad about getting up and walking over to another one. I have one at AD, he said in one session period, he went to like 3 different sessions before he found one that he felt good about. And then if you make connections and network, ask someone who's sitting next to you, hey, can you get a handout for me? And then you move on to another one. That's a key piece.
Yeah, as you were talking to Iris, I was thinking about the fact that I think we need to really be available to coach students on on the sessions that they select. Because, if it says advanced, you know your students. And so if it's going to be about critical race theory and they've not even had a conversation about who they are as a racial being, they probably shouldn't go to that session. But I think it may be drawing, so I think we can, but they could, but I think it's good just to have a great conversation with students in terms of saying, so what's your intent? Why do you want to go to that session? And then, and then help them to kind of navigate the experience, especially if you're someone who's attended NCORE, then there's some sessions that are better for others and maybe not for others. So just be in that space of assisting and not telling them what to go to, because I know one campus that basically says you must go to sessions and you can't all go to sessions together. Okay, I understand that you don't want your entire delegation to go to one session, but I think it's very fine for pairs, 2 or 3 people to go together because, they may not feel as comfortable being by themselves, and that's fine. But I do understand, I do understand that the thing, you don't want 12 of them to roll into a program, and, I get that, which is fine. That's cool.
I only have 4. They can't go into sessions together.
No, you say they all have to be separate.
That's right. Suck it up. And how are you going to build a network if you're there with your buddy? You're not going to talk to anybody else. So
yeah, if you have a small group, that is true. That's true. Well, and I don't know, did we want to do that? We talked about having a poll. I don't know if we had that opportunity to do it as we sort of at this point, but.
We can. I just launched it.
Oh, thank you. Look at you, reading my mind. Come on
now. While folks are taking the poll, I do have a couple of questions. Oh, look at that. This is the first webinar that we've used the poll, so this is kind of cool. So I have a couple questions. The first is, can you all talk a little bit more about the learning agreement? So you mentioned that some schools implement a learning agreement before they go. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. You want me to start? I'll start. I'll make sure that, I know Iowa State University has one, and I'll make sure that a part of the packet that we share that. And I don't know, Iris, if you or Quantá have it too, we can kind of share examples, but really it's sort of it basically talks about, things about participation and, you will attend sessions and you will engage in debriefing and you will, just something that really kind of grounds you into saying, this is an experience similar to what Iris mentioned earlier. It's like you are representing the institution. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that you are, number one, doing it in a way that represents us in a wonderful and special way, and that you are learning too. So and I like the learning agreements that says that we ask you to do this as a participant, but we will also pledge to do this too as someone who's supporting you to go. Whether it be we will engage you in conversations and debriefing and that sort of thing. So those are the things that come to mind for me.
And our learning agreement is nothing that they have to sign, but it's in their letter of invitation that comes from me. And I state the expectations. And when we meet with them prior to going, we cover that again and what we're looking at. So in essence, with them actually attending is their verbal commitment that they're going to follow through. And my students are required to write at least a 3-page reflection. To go ahead and include pictures so that they don't have to, it's not like a course or anything, but if they include pictures just to kind of help solidify for them what that experience has been like. At times, I have actually sent their reports to my Vice President of Student Affairs to show the worth and the value of having not only my staff attend, but also to have students in the room and having this experience. And so when I ask for additional money for this kind of thing, it's like, go ahead, do it. You know, you're good to go.
Quantá, if you want to talk about, does your institution do learning agreements?
Yeah, so ours are part of our pre-travel meeting, and I think it is an opportunity to do some of the stuff that Vernon mentioned, but talking about through those sessions, see what's understanding about what's going on. So it's a, hey, this is where I am. I'm a first-year student who's now been elected the vice president of Latino Student Association. Okay, what does that mean and how to navigate those spaces? We structure our learning agreements around mission, vision, and purpose. So, hey, you're funded through the Multicultural Center, you're funded through the Women's Gender Sexuality Department, you're funded through student activities. So as you're coming in, you know that those officers who are giving you permission to be here have these goals. How are we then making sure that you have a conference experience that allows you to have those things? So we are able to talk about our learning agreement in that way. It also has a minimum number of session hours to attend, knowing when to be able to check in with folks, and also just different contact people. Again, knowing who is there to be like, hey, I can't get Quantá because Quantá is presenting right now. Who are other staff or professionals that things happen? I work in student activities, so my job is to mitigate risk. So I always plan those what if scenarios, and in those learning agreements, we talk through if this, then those are the things that need to happen as well.
I have another question. So we've talked a lot about kind of our expectations of students and what students should expect, but I'm curious about what does it take to be a leader, bringing those students, and then also debriefing, right? Because there's a level of, I mean, last year was my first NCORE, and it was a lot. It was a lot for me, and I also have a clinical background, so I'm able to process in a different way. So what would it take for someone bringing students to have the skills necessary to help folks process through?
Yeah, I'll start with that because I think, so one of my philosophies I tell my students here is that if you've not attended NCORE, I don't recommend you bring in students your first year, because I need you to know how you'll be able to respond in those moments and to have those experiences before we're ready to receive. And I think that's just a philosophy I have with a number of things. So I think that's piece one in that, but I also knowing your limits as a staff member and being able to say, I don't know, or I can't help you with that. Like, I think sometimes we get this superhero cape that we thought we have to answer everything. And it's like, no, I'm not the best person to help you process this. Let me connect you with someone that I trust or I know that has a relationship in that can better assist you in that. Because wanting to provide an immediate answer may not be the best thing that can help that student, whatever is going on.
And Quantá made a very valid point, because I remember one of the times that a couple of my cohorts, colleagues attended, and the very first time they attended some of Eddie Moore's sessions, and they are white. And so we call it holding, and we are in the lobby of the hotel, and you normally know there's libations occurring, but more heated conversation about what was presented, and they had a chance to discuss it even more with him. But it would have been horrendous if they had had students there as well, because they were having to deal with some of the ish that came up and out. Even though these were people who were allies, but they realized that there were some biases and some blind spots that they didn't have and didn't understand that they had. And so working on developing themselves in this area. So I don't even know right now if they would be even comfortable in having students, but some of their students cross between their office and my office, so the students can come via my staff, and we can help work them through. But it's been really good because those faculty members and staff members who have attended now are doing more of the work, because it was with one office, the Gender Relations Center, the Shades of Ebony, which is an African-American female group, wanted to start dinner during Women's Week. And I was like, go talk to the Gender Relations Center. And she was like, well, I told them to come to you because you're multicultural. I said, well, wait a minute. Gender identity is your thing. You can do this. You can do this. And it broadened the students that they were really working with. And so they are our major funder of this event for this group, this African American female group. So I think it helps for them to start thinking, oh yeah, let me push my parameters and the things that I can do to. But you have to deal with your own stuff first, your own biases that you may not, even they're unconscious and you don't aware that you have.
I'm so glad you asked that question too, because, oh my God, it's so important for us to talk about faculty and staff that are attending in delegations, because I think there's a tendency to focus on the students, which is wonderful. But I have found that the struggles that I had when I was with student delegations in the past have been with faculty and staff who are jolted into understanding their privilege or their racial identity group and not ready to really engage. And so it can kind of surprise you when you have some people who think that they pretty much got it when it comes to issues of race. And then they get to NCORE and realize, no, there's some things I need to learn. And at the same time, you don't want the students to then, sometimes I think some faculty and staff will take up too much space to try to work out their stuff when students are trying to engage. And also too, students have relationships with these faculty and staff on campus, and they see them show up in ways that aren't exactly positive at NCORE, and they're like, well, wait a minute now, hold on. So those are things we need to navigate. I mean, before, during, and after, because I always tell people, it's like taking a cohort to an event. I mean, you all are together. And so it's the dynamics of relationships and what that looks like, so important, so important, so important. I saw the
applicant. A question from Alicia. So Alicia asks, how do the expectations change for seniors who will not be returning to to school next year? Does their school year status also affect who's chosen to attend?
Well,
it does. I'm sorry, Vernon, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, I think that, I'm glad it's good to talk about the application process for a little bit, I think, because, many of us have different ways in which we do that. For me personally, I mean, I think it's really important when you develop a process, if you do have an application process because you have to choose, I would definitely ask questions about who people are in their raced being. Because I think a lot of times when you have an application process, they'll want to put what they do, like what positions they're in. But what you want to do is have them, first of all, do a narrative around who am I as a raced person? So white people can talk about being white. And if you can't write about being white, you probably shouldn't be going to the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity. If you call yourself English and Irish and you don't want to claim that you're white, then you probably, that's not your first thing. Your first thing should not be to go to the NCORE. Now, that being said, though, I think it's important for there to be some sort of process for you. I know some people are asking about their senior year. For me personally, I believe that whoever goes to NCORE needs to be able to come back and in some way impact the campus. And so for me, seniors would not be my first choice to go. If I had a list of like who would go, that doesn't mean I wouldn't, like for instance, I know that when I was taking a group of students, we had a student that was going to go to graduate school the next year at the same campus. And I'm like, or at our campus. And I was like, absolutely. But we didn't take many I don't remember taking seniors hardly at all, mainly because we wanted to make sure that the students who went came back and contributed.
Yeah, Vernon's point's directly where it is. We do not allow our seniors to go, but it's how are you contributing? Either come back as graduate school, but we also do a couple of transition meetings over the summer. So therefore, if you're coming back in a part of that training team, we'll allow you to go then. But normally we are selecting those underclassmen who are either primed for a role or if they've been elected, selected, or appointed to serve in a capacity to fill a void and understand what's going on in that.
And we also don't take seniors. The only reason we did the one young lady who was co-presenting her the summer that she was graduating was because of the fact that we'd taken her before. We knew her commitment. She had definitely contributed to the campus climate. And so consequently, I ran her by my AVP because I was like, love you, dear, but you've had your turn. And when my AVP said, go ahead, we'll make sure that you have the funding to cover her. That was the only reason, because she was presenting. But otherwise, I would have, like anyone else, you need summer scholarships. We normally do, you go with us once, and then we allow space for someone else to go.
So I just want to throw in a couple of things. I've been taking notes. The first is the Student Scholars Program. For folks who are interested in having their students apply, that is available for sponsorship. So in the event that you have a little extra money at your campus and you want to see more students come to NCORE, you can gift NCORE and gift that money to a student. And so that's the first thing. Always taking sponsorships. The second thing is, I heard folks talk about what happens when they come back, when students come back, and that there's some assignment connected. We have in the past highlighted blog articles written by students who attended NCORE on our social media platforms. So it would be great to encourage your students to write and reflect and then pass that on to us so that we can make sure that students' voice in that institution is amplified. That's the way in which we get folks to come back and stay engaged. We talked a little bit about funding. I would like to know if any of the three of you, because funding is always an issue in the question, right? If you have some specific strategies. I know that Vernon mentioned connecting it to your university's mission and pitching it to the president in that way, which is another way that you can also pitch sponsorship of NCORE to your institution, is to connect it and align it to the D&I goals of your institution. But are there any specific strategies for funding for students and for folks that are bringing students?
We use it as an opportunity to talk about coalition building. So, hey, this is an opportunity for us to meet with other partners and other institutions that way. We have folks on our campus that are competitive. So I love the fact that Iowa State takes 30 people. So I was like, so if they're taking 30, how many are we taking? What is their equal commitment to that? So if this is something that we value, they have been able to find ways to do it. And I know that we can find ways to fund things that are important to us. So how do we say that, hey, we're going to be a leading and an innovator and an eminent institution? How are we finding other ways to match those?
And as I stated earlier, I include that in my programming money each year. My budget, I have it divided up by ethnicities. And so I set aside $2,000 out of each ethnic group to help fund students to go to NCORE. But when I reach out to different administrators, that's if other students want to attend. I also talk to them about going to the College of Arts and Letters, because if they're in that college, they can apply for learning beyond the classroom. But once again, they need to do that earlier. So I would say no later than January, because everyone taps into that for summer learning opportunities. And also to talk to different departments too. If there are departments that are focusing on diversity and inclusion work, to talk to them. You may not get much, but $200, but if students are putting skin in the game, to ask different NCORE to do the work, because that's what's really important.
We lost that last sentence. You want to say that last sentence again?
When students have skin in the game and have asked that money, then they are more inclined to do the work once they get to NCORE. Got it?
Yeah. I got and you got me thinking too. I got three things that people don't think about when you think about funding. One is alumni affairs. Most campuses have specific groups for alumni of color. And so what you need to do is you need to be very strategic. And what I love about Iowa State, what they did was, Dr. Tom Hill, amazing man. What he did was he thought, okay, at Iowa State, the College of Agriculture is the largest and probably the best funded college in the university, because we're a land grant and we're in Iowa. So he sent 2 faculty members to NCORE the first 2 or 3 years. And now the College of Agriculture don't help send students every year because he really thought strategically about, so where's the pockets of money on this campus? And I'm gonna send a faculty member from that department or from that college, and he he kept building relationships and building relationships. So definitely alumni affairs, definitely colleges that are pockets of money. And the other thing that I was thinking about too is athletics. We need to remember that every athletic department has a student affairs person in athletics. And it's usually called student services or student support services. It's something, but there's a person in every athletic department, specifically those top tier athletic programs, that they have those. And so you may want to make sure that you connect with those folks to say, so would you like to maybe send a couple of your students, student athletes to NCORE? So there's so many pockets of money. I always tell people, universities have money. It's just where they decide to use their money. And so when anybody tells me, when I hear an institution say, well, we just don't have funding for that. No, actually, you do have funding for it. You've just chosen not to give funding to this initiative. So what you need to do is try to shift that narrative so you're part of that, where they say, okay, we will be a part of this conversation and whatever that looks like for your campus.
That athletics focus kind of got me hyped over here because I've been thinking about that for the year that I've been here at NCORE, is how do you, especially at, we're at the University of Oklahoma, we are, top tier sport athletics program here. And so, yeah, there's a lot of money flowing through athletics department.
There's a lot of money.
And with the intersection of race and sports, and that being an issue, how can we engage those departments in this conversation?
I love the question that you're probably seeing it. There's a great question around students who may be attending who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, low income, and they're, for instance, we're taking them to Portland, Oregon. I mean, and large city, how can we assist students? And I love this question because I think it's really important to really get a sense for, I sometimes take for granted the privilege I have in the way that I travel around the world doing the work that I do. And most folks don't have that. And so with undergraduate students, for some of them, I know when I was at Iowa State, some of the students that we took to NCORE had never been on a plane before. They'd never traveled outside of the state of Iowa. And so we really did have some great conversations about, so what are some of your fears? What are some of your concerns? What are some of your thoughts? And we really had to really think very specifically about, so if I'm someone who's never traveled before, I wouldn't know to make sure that I took my ID with me to make sure I can get through security. Or, I mean, the very, I don't want to say simple, but the things that we take for granted, we need to have conversations. And then maybe a conversation about, so while we're there, how can we then manage food and entertainment? How do we want to do dinners together? Is there a way that we can, have money that's available from the institution that's a per diem? Or how can we support folks? Because I think that there'll be many students that won't want to share initially that they may not have the funds to be a part of this group. So we may have to we have to share the information before they ask it. And so that's the big thing for me is like, I think you may want to think about, so what is it that could be asked of us? And then go ahead and say it before it's even asked. Because some students may not have the agency to say, I really am nervous about the fact that I'm going to be in a hotel room and I've never stayed in a hotel before. So what does that look like? And so I'm so glad there was a great conversation about that. I love to maybe, I know that on some campuses, there's a letter or an email that goes to the parents that says, just want to let you know, I'm the person that's in charge of taking these students to NCORE. This is the conference. Here's what's going to happen. And they've even said, you can go as far as, I don't know if I would give them my cell phone number, but I would say, here's my email address. And if they did want my cell phone number, I would, I'd be open to that. But so you may want to just think about, so what does that look like for your campus? And, if there's been other times when you've taken people to, in groups to different conferences, have you done something similar to that? So something, I would always say, look at the Office of Residential Life, and many of them take students to conferences all the time because there are residence hall student conferences. And if you want to partner with them to say, what have you done with your delegations when you've taken them? Because I've noticed that a lot of people who take students to NCORE have never done that before. They're people who are not, they're not folks who take students on trips. And so it's really important to have that conversation. So I'm glad that question came up. Thank you.
And that's one of the things that part of our pre-conference orientation, I guess best way to capture it. We talk to them about we provide $200 toward the meals, in which I say majority of the time the students are turning back at least $75. I don't know what they're eating, but they are very fiscal with their fiscal responsibility. They definitely show, and they end up going out together and they'll split the money. Somebody said, well, I'll cover this lunch, or we'll go here, versus eating the highfalutin places because I have $200. They also, my office coordinator, when she is talking about their travel arrangements, she talks to them about how are your, what type of ID do you have? How is your name listed on that ID? Because it's important for us to make sure that the plane ticket says the same. And then you need to know that you need to bring this. So she covers all of that prior to our pre-conference meeting. We always do that the first week in May before students start their finals, and we give them a packet with everything that they will need to bring with them. We collect everyone's telephone number, flight itinerary, so everyone arrive at the airport about the same time, or at least they come in pairs, and they can either stay and wait for one of the administrators to get there, or they can take an Uber or Lyft or whatever to get to the hotel till we can get there to check them in. Just to share the challenges, one year, all of our students got to the site, and my assistant and I we were stranded in Indiana, in South Bend. We couldn't get out because there was a thunderstorm coming through, and we couldn't leave till the next day. So that was the first time I'd ever had. So we had to try to set up and do credit card information to the hotel so the students could get checked in. And so that was something we had, like I said, we've been doing this for 20-some years, and that was the first time we even ran into that. So now we had to set up a backup system in case that happens as well. So, so there's a lot of moving pieces, but we want to make sure that the students are comfortable in regard to whatever's happens. So when we got there the next day, they had, they didn't have their money, but they were able to eat, because if they spend any of their own money, we reimburse them for that. But we try to say, we don't want them running to Ruth Chris to eat. Let's be reasonable and sensible. And that has, like I said, that has worked, but it's really about educating the students. And like I said, if the parents have any questions, we tell them, feel free to have your parent call us, because we really adhere to FERPA. And majority of the time, out of all the times we've been doing this, only one parent has called with any kind of questions or concerns, because they thought that they were still going to have to come out of the money themselves. And we're like, no, this is a free ride. This is about development for your child.
I think the one last thing that I want to add is just relationships is important in that. So making sure you know the students you're taking and be able to have that conversation. I think there's been times in which it'd be like, hey, NCORE is Wednesday through Sunday. I don't get paid till Friday. So can we have those conversations as well? So I think making sure that you know that's what you're taking, that you are taking to have those type of conversations with. I think that there are just nuances in making sure that that sense of comfort and understanding and care is there, so you can be able to navigate whatever may come up.
One little fun thing that I was thinking about that you need to make sure that you let your students know is that there's one day that's called Spirit Day, where folks wear their institution t-shirts or sweatshirts. And so some campuses go all out and they all have matching shirts from the campus, but I think it's really cool when they all have different shirts, but from the same campus. So always important to let students know to pack those shirts from your campus so they're ready for Spirit Day to to be to show their wares.
We got some new t-shirts and I'm so excited to wear them.
Oh my God, they get so excited on that day. So excited.
We're excited to wear our t-shirts too, though.
I'm bougie. I don't wear t-shirts. I wear my polos and my cardigans.
I'm not on a campus, so, but I always wear something though. I always wear something that's, something.
And I always talk to the students about the fun things that happen, like the cultural event that's happening at Wednesday evening, the reception, and then the J-Dot dance on Friday night. I tell the students about that too. I said it's old school, but it all depends on who the DJ is. And so they get a chance to see the administrators out of their regular role having a good time in dancing. So I think that's good for the students too, to realize that we are human as they are. We're just a tad older, plus some.
Well, and I would say too, I love that. Iris, you're a mess. I think though that what's really important I was just thinking about this as you were talking, Iris, is that if there is time, I know the schedule is really tight, but I think it's really important, whatever city we're in, for students to get a sense for that city and the dynamics of race and class and gender, everything. So we're in Portland, and race in Portland is different than race in Bloomington, Indiana, or in Washington, D.C., or in Ames, Iowa. And so it would be great if, they go to a restaurant that's in the city, or at least do a little tour. It doesn't have to be something that's expensive. The great thing about Portland is the downtown area is really easy to get to by light rail. And I know most of the hotels are downtown anyway, but just no matter where you're staying, Portland's a really good movable place for folks. And so I just would encourage you to incorporate something that's community-based, because I think a lot of times when we go to conferences, we don't engage in the community. And I don't think we're not doing ourselves a justice for the work that we're doing, because it's really the community that's doing the work. And so I sometimes notice that on campuses where we're sort of in a bubble on our campus, and our students aren't doing anything in the community that's right outside that need us, and we need to learn from them too. So that would be something I would just add.
And that's what our dinner on Monday night is, actually out in the community. Now I go to in New Orleans, I go to Deanie's, that's my favorite place. But this year, when we had a student who was with us who was from New Orleans, and so she liked the Royal House. So we went to the Royal House, which is a new experience. So we always go out into the community. So when we dine with our students, it's not in the hotel. It's really going out. And I even got them hooked on beignets. So, but that's very
good. On beignets.
Pardon?
It's not hard to get hooked on beignets.
No, it's not. So we even took them after we ate at the Royal House, and we walked down to Cafe du Monde, and I told them, I said, you got to get the hot chocolate. So really trying to get them immersed in what the culture is about.
Well, in New Orleans, I got hooked on charbroiled oysters. Oh my God, so good.
I'm going to share Charlene's message with folks. Charlene says she is in Oregon, and I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to see her.
That's a great resource.
Yes.
I will be writing that down.
Are there any more questions? We have about 5 more minutes before we wrap up. I think that this has been a really robust discussion with some good nuggets and good takeaways for people. Are there any final or concluding thoughts?
Well, I'll start. I just want to thank folks for joining us and hanging out. All 3 of us are very willing to have other conversations offline. Email us, let us know. I'll definitely work on getting that packet out to folks so that I just need to connect with a couple of folks who said they wanted to give us some things, and then we'll get it to you within the next week or so you can have some resources. I would say that every time I've ever gone with I miss going to NCORE with delegations because so much learning happens. You can see all participants' lights just light up. And I know that it was mentioned earlier that over the years, I want to say there's close to maybe 600 students now that are attending NCORE. I think maybe about that number. Quantá can maybe correct me, but it's huge. That's a large number of students that are attending NCORE, and I think the community of NCORE has shifted because of that, and I think that it's an amazing thing. And I think the other thing that I'll say that I forgot to mention is that to not forget about the exhibit area. One of the things that I've noticed over the years of going to NCORE is the exhibit hall area has just blossomed. with not only resources for students and student groups, but also to things to purchase, whether it be t-shirts or jewelry or clothing. I mean, it's such a robust sort of exhibit area that is a surprise, I think, to some people who are used to going to higher education conferences where you're just kind of, well, there's yet another book I can buy. It's not only that, it's much, much more. So I think it's really important to really engage the exhibit hall.
And I think too, what I, like Vernon, want to thank everyone for joining us, but I think remember that this is a learning experience not only for the students, but for us as administrators and faculty there, to come with an open mind as well as an open heart to receive whatever we experience there. And not to feel uncomfortable in challenging yourself. I think that's important, that's how we grow. And definitely use the vendors. I tend to be up in there a little bit more than I should. But anyhow, with that aside, the students have been really good in finding resources for me to go back and purchase or order. A lot of times we come, our luggage is already heavy. So talk to the vendors, get back to campus, and we still have your 20% discount depending on who some of the book vendors are. And they do honor that. And that's how I've gotten a lot of my resources back. But I also use the students as eyes for our library to say, I think this is a piece that you need to get or a persons that you need to bring. So utilize that for more than just going and hanging out, but definitely as an educational piece to help expand the knowledge and conversations on your campus.
So Alicia says, would you all be willing to share your specific resources of what you ask students to reflect on and the information you provide for the pre-NCORE meeting and information you provide for the post-NCORE meeting? Her intention is to use those to inform how she can best support the community at Pacific University.
Yep, so whoever's doing the packet, if you, Quantá, you're doing the packet, whoever's doing the packet couldn't include that for her.
Vernon's yeah. I'm going to coordinate it, but y'all send that to me, and we'll make sure, Alicia, we'll make sure we have those things in that for sure.
And I will get those out to you as soon as I receive them.
Yes.
So we can move to close. I just want to thank you all for your expertise and your continued support of NCORE. If you all can't tell, if you've never been to NCORE, NCORE is a community. I've been here for a little over a year, and I learned that very quickly. The word community was being used, but as I've gotten more and more settled in it, it is one. And to kind of celebrate and highlight the fact that we are a community, this year we have NCORE t-shirts for folks. We're going to be, they're on sale right now online. We're going to be selling some at the conference. There's not going to be a whole lot for selling at the conference, but you can definitely buy them online now and pick it up at the conference. And that's just our way of kind of building the physical community of NCORE around the country and the world. We have some folks that are international now that support the conference. So if you all have any questions, Vernon and Quantá have added their email address. Iris, if you don't mind putting your email address in the chat box.
Sure.
You can also email me, and I will do my best to get your questions answered. So thank you very much, you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Everyone have a good evening.
All right.
Bye.